Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 2 of Take Your Time, Persona podcast, where we play Persona 5 Royal in real time, along with the real calendar dates in-game in the real world. It's gonna be great. I'm Tom Marks, joined as always by Jonathan Dornbush.
We use the word real a lot, and I realize that can, kind of trip you up as you're talking. We definitely didn't plan ahead for that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Persona deals with what is real and what isn't real, so... Moving on, we've got a very fun show for you today, our first full week happening. We also get into our first day of free time, which we'll get into and talk about, of course, as we get closer to it. But first, we got some emails. We asked for some responses from you guys, and Jonathan, you got some emails, didn't you?
We did. We got some questions and comments, and first of all, I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who commented on the YouTube video as well. There was a lot of excited to play along, or people who were like, I started and then got ahead of you guys, but I'm excited to listen. So we appreciate it. As I think Tom said at the top of last week's show, do not worry about going ahead of us. We are playing because of the podcast in this way. You don't have to play this way. But we did get some questions and some things, especially because I think we have a balance of, newcomers and Persona 5 fans. So the first question we got was from Soul Searcher, and Soul Searcher asked, is Persona 5 Royal a huge difference from Persona 5? It looks like the P5 base game is included in the PlayStation Plus collection, which it is on PS5, but I'm open to getting Royal if it's worth it. Thank goodness the show's going week by week. I'm hoping to catch up to it in game. So yeah, I've seen this from a few people basically asking, if I play Persona 5 and listen along, will that be enough? Or should I jump into Persona 5 Royal because P5 is often cheaper on sale or is part of the PS Plus collection? And Tom, since you've played through Royal and I haven't, I wanted to get your perspective on it.
Yeah, so... Yes and no, I think, is the answer. Basically, if you just want to get it through the PS Plus collection and play along with us, you can do that relatively successfully. There will be events and certain characters missing, obviously, from the base game, but largely you would be able to follow along with the general story without missing too much, and then until we get kind of really deeper into it. And importantly, the base game is still a fantastic game, right? It's still something I'd absolutely recommend. That said, there will be stuff missing from Royal, or from the base game that's in Royal, and also Royal makes just 1,000 little tweaks to the base game that make it so much nicer to play and so much better. You get a lot more time. The gun mechanics, which we're going to talk about today, actually, for the first time, are massively improved in Royal. So there's little things here and there where I would say, yes, it's worth it to have the Royal version instead, but that obviously, whether it's financially worth it is a very personal question, up to you. If you think you want to spend the money, then I'd say it's worth doing so, but if you don't want to, then absolutely just play the base game. It's still really great, and you'll largely be able to follow along.
Yeah, and as someone who hasn't played Royal yet, I will say that, the podcast will still be here, so if you don't want to, if you want to get to Royal, but it's $60 right now, I have seen it go on sale already to $30 a couple times, and that probably only means it will go on sale again in the coming months, especially on PlayStation. There's now sales every 2 weeks, so yeah, you'll probably be able to get it on sale. But yeah, it's you'll definitely, I think, understand the broad strokes as someone who has only played Persona 5, but probably, especially once we get to later in the calendar, there will be some heavy chunks of info you won't quite get. But yeah,
and the good news is, if it goes on sale in 3 months and you buy it then, we'll still only be 20 more hours into the game. Yeah. So it's fine. You won't have missed much.
We'll still firmly be in P5 territory. But it's definitely an interesting one, and I can understand, especially when the base game is available in so many places. It's a bummer, I think, that they'd never made the Royal content available as DLC.
Yeah.
Which is sort of like an Atlas ongoing thing. But yeah, it's if you want the full experience of Take Your Time, you'll want to go for Royal. The other email we got, our first email to dornology@gmail.com, which you can also write into if you have questions for the show, was from Tom, and Tom wrote in, not you, Tom, another Tom.
Different Tom. I'm not writing into the show myself, I swear.
But if you are, I wouldn't spoil that, because... you got to do what you can to make the show work, and sometimes that means supplying your own questions. Tom said, first of all, an amazing idea for a podcast. Again, not you. Though that must be an
I have said that.
Though that must be
too.
an agonizing way to play Persona. Again, you've kind of said that. Oh God, this is not going well. Later on, he does clarify where he's from, so that'll reveal it. But such a cool idea, and all the credit to me and Tom for putting it together and committing to do it. So thank you for doing the awesome show.
It's getting more confusing as it goes.
For one of my favorite games of all time. In episode 1, there was some confusion on how to say, and I'm going to say it, LeBlanc. And just a quick Google revealed, thank you for doing the legwork, which I totally did not do after the show, reveals that the Café LeBlanc is based on the French author Maurice Leblanc. So I asked my professor, who is from France, how you say that name, and he said that based on American English, you would pronounce the C so that it would sound like LeBlanc. But if you pronounce it in French, the C is silent, so it is more like LeBlanc. Some other trivia for the two of us is that Maurice Leblanc is, of course, the author who created the famous literary character known as Arsène Lupin, who appeared in 17 novels and many more novellas. And, of course, Arsène in the game is Joker's persona. So there's all these little references, and Arsène is referred to as a gentleman thief, which is the name that you'll hear a bit for the Phantom Thieves. Anyway... Thank you so much for doing the podcast during your obviously very busy schedules. All the best from Long Island, Nassau County too, which is where I'm from, Tom. So unless you reveal to me that you secretly live nearby me for all of my life and we never knew this, it's a different Tom.
Jonathan, we're actually brothers. I know. Big twist.
Wow, I didn't know this was going to be a soap opera too. This is exciting.
So the C thing is very interesting. Thank you, obviously, Tom, for writing in with that. The connection to LeBlanc and the Arsène, I didn't realize. The funny thing about this, though, is, like, there's other little pronunciation things, right? Like, Anne would be pronounced Anne in American English, but because the A in Japanese is pronounced Ah, it's on. So, like, there are little pronunciation things there that, like, are in the translation that are just a little bit weird. So, like, I'm probably just going to keep calling it LeBlanc because that's what they say in the game. But, like, I really do appreciate that.
So,
well, then we're just going to battle. We're going to have both.
It balances out.
Yeah. But that's really cool. Also, Tom wrote in that email with an answer to last week's pop quiz.
Yes.
Which was, they said... The answer to Tom's quiz is Haru, which there is a conversation this week by Haru in the hallway and an NPC, which explains this. That's right. If you talk to a pink-sweatered, frizzy-haired girl right before you go up to the roof, if you don't remember last week's question was, why is the roof to Shujin unlocked? It explains that this girl who's standing there, a teacher has left the door unlocked for her so that she can tend the plants, which is very cute. And you'll meet that character later on if your first time in this game, or playing this game. But that's all the preamble. Thank you again for people who wrote into dornology@gmail.com or just messaged us with questions. We really do appreciate it. Let's get into the actual episode this week because it's our first full week and it's a big one and we got a lot to go through. First off, a real quick content warning for anybody who may be concerned. This week's episode will be talking about suicide and sexual assault. So those are major themes within this game, and just quick content warning for anyone who would be appreciative of it or is nervous around hearing things around those topics. But we've got our first full week of April 12th through April 18th. And if you remember at the end of last week, they had just come back. They had gone into Kamoshida's castle, freaked out, Joker awakened, they left, and now we're to the next day, April 12th, where we had that Velvet Room conversation that we weren't sure whether it was which day, the morning before. But then you go back to Shujin, and on the way, you run into the brand new character, the redhead with a ponytail, who I think at this point in the game you still don't know her name, but she's introduced later in the week as Yoshizawa, and she's very polite and very cute, and you help her out with a situation. Another one of those little royal moments just sort of like tucked into pre-existing story. As you go back, then after school, Ryuji basically drags you along. It's kind of funny how much Joker, like, doesn't want to do this, but Ryuji basically is like, we gotta go looking for that castle. So they search around the school, then finally they realize that if they use the app that's on their phones, they can re-enter and get to the castle, which they do, and Morgana's there, and Morgana is like, what the heck, why'd you guys Or no, not at this point. Never mind. That's a different Morgana getting mad at you. Morgana gets mad at them a lot.
There's a lot of getting mad at you in general, so it's fair to, cross
Basically,
lines.
Ryuji, being the best boy, is concerned about the people still inside, and Morgana agrees to guide you in before then revealing that these people that are being tortured inside of Kamoshida's palace, who you realize are all of the volleyball team members that he coaches, aren't real. They're cognitive versions that Kamoshida had created, right? Ryuji also hands you a gun, just like it's a model gun, but he apparently had brought that to school, which is deeply concerning as an American.
Well, I really like that he was just like, there's a bit of a line of dialogue where it's like, why would you have, like, I wrote down in my notes, why would you bring that with you, Ryuji? And then later on it was like, oh yeah, he was coming because he thought he would be prepared. Like, he thought it would be intimidating to bring into the palace. And it's just one of those funny, like, Ryuji just wants to be a good guy and do good. He maybe doesn't go about it in the best ways always, but he had good intentions.
Yeah. But the good news is you now have a gun, which, because you're in a cognitive world, even though it's a model gun with no bullets, the enemies don't know that, and so therefore they think it's real, and therefore it functions, which is just the greatest video game logic.
Lore, yeah.
It's
a good workaround. If you explain it away especially in an introductory few days in this game where you're learning so much about the world, you're definitely right. It's one of those things where, like, if I stop and think about it, it's total ridiculous nonsense, but I love it for that, and I'm like, yeah, I'll go along with this. That makes sense.
Yeah, but like you said, and also the other part of it is they basically never bring it up ever again.
Yes,
like,
exactly. You just have
model guns. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Where the, like, knife that you're carrying comes from, don't worry about that either. We'll move on. So, they leave the dungeons. Ryuji, you guys get attacked, and Ryuji has his own Persona Awakening moment to his Persona Captain Kid, who is just so cool, like a punk skeleton pirate riding a pirate ship like a skateboard with a cannon for an arm. Just super cool. And then, as you leave, Morgana's like, hey, you're gonna help me now, right? And you're basically like, nah, and just bail on Morgana, which is super cold.
Yeah, but I think what's funny is, especially as someone, as two people who have, seen through the experience and know where things go, it is, I think, really fair and interesting that, and this isn't the first case this week, but we see a lot of points during the week where, like, essentially all these characters are still strangers to each other, and so, like,
right.
It's not wild that they would all kind of be a bit more self-serving than they end up being. Like, it strikes me a few times during this week, which we'll definitely get to, but yeah, I just came away like, oh yeah, like, it's sort of rude or cold, but I also kind of get it. Like, it doesn't always make it right, but, like, I understand why they're acting this way often.
Yeah, at this point, like, just double checking, you and Ryuji met the day before, right? Like, you and Ryuji have known each other for 24 hours at this point.
Yeah.
And only in the context, basically, of this crazy situation. So, you're right that it's still very fresh, these relationships. And it makes sense that, well, I mean, that said, Ryuji and Morgana really don't get along, which is something I sort of forgot at the beginning, is how much they really don't get along.
Morgana is super antagonistic to Ryuji from the start, though, is I think the fair. Like, because you are already, taken over by the Persona aesthetic and everything, Morgana seems a little more okay with you. And doesn't think you're a total idiot, but just off the bat is like, oh, this dumbass over here won't shut up about all these idiotic ideas. My God, is he the worst? Anyway, you're all right, so I'll deal with him. It's like, whoa, all right, you little cat. But there's definitely
cat.
A little bit of a cat. But yeah, there's a lot of infighting, which is funny. And again, I sort of get, because they're also meeting under very stressful circumstances.
Sure.
But yeah.
So Morgana explains while they're in there that these people aren't real, but it probably is some sort of indication of what's actually happening to these people in the real world. If this is how Kamoshida kind of cognitively sees them, this is probably what he's doing so to some extent, not like literally making them run on a treadmill with like spikes behind it, like a spike barrel behind it, but like, some sort of physical abuse. So Ryuji and Joker out of the castle, basically vow to make Kamoshida pay for what he's done and expose him in some way. Moving on to the next day, you have another Velvet Room conversation that night that's basically like, hey, you got to make friends, is like the summary of it, if I may sum up, is like, in order to avoid ruin, as Igor, another mispronunciation that I'm not going to get into, tells you, like, you have to make bonds with other people, which is one of the things you've done with Ryuji, is you've made an actual, like, confidant bond with him at this point.
And is that when you make your bond with Igor?
I think it is as well, yeah. I think you get them as well at that point. And confidants is a thing for new players that's going to become very important as you progress and get more free time. Moving on, the April 13th is the day of the volleyball rally, which seems kind of early for a volleyball rally if this is like the beginning of the semester, but I'm not going to judge. Different culture.
I didn't play volleyball, so I don't know.
We get a lovely animated cutscene of a teachers versus students volleyball game where Kamoshida is very good at volleyball and spikes it right into the dome of a kid that we will later learn is named Mishima, and basically knocks him out cold, and then plays the nice guy to try to help him out. But the volleyball rally is not super important because you blow it off to basically investigate and interrogate volleyball players about if Kamoshida is abusing them, if Kamoshida, like, seeing if you can get someone to snitch, basically. Which is very bold as a strategy, to just be like, let's just ask him.
Yeah, you're just going up to students and being like, so, is he hurting you? Like, just in the hallway. And don't get me wrong, I think, like, it's great they want to address it and expose this terrible man. But yeah, I think it's also indicative of, like, yeah, they're just some high schoolers. They're not going to have, like, a very strategic approach to finding out evidence of what's going on. But, also, they're talking to a bunch of teenagers, so maybe one of them would just say, accidentally, the secret. But.
Yeah, and it's also very indicative of, and this, I won't spoil anything, but like, it's funny and very in contrast to later when you eventually get some people on your team that are, let's say, more strategically inclined, that you then are like, oh yeah, they didn't know what the heck they were doing at this point. They're just like walking up to people. So you go looking for people. Basically, no one will talk. No one wants to talk to you. Everyone's like, back off. Stop being a jerk. I got these injuries through volleyball practice, and like just blowing you off. Finally, you find Mishima, who was the kid who got hurt. And as you're talking to him, Kamoshida comes up and gives you a bunch of lip and then walks off. And then Mishima basically says, everyone knows what's happening. The teachers know he's abusing us. Our parents know he's abusing us. Nobody cares. It doesn't matter if you find someone to squeal. You're not going to be able to expose it. And he leaves. And similarly, this is obviously very disheartening to them, but then similarly On comes up and also warns you to back off and stop looking into Kamoshida. At this point, continuing with the sort of conversation, the theme we were talking about last week of like your perception of somebody not being necessarily true to who they are, right? Mm-hmm. Like, this is the way they paint On. And I'm talking about this because this gets revealed, literally in a day or two. I think actually the next day. So it's not a huge spoiler to say it now. Like, On is painted in this moment as like, all the rumors you'd been hearing about her are that, like, she's Kamoshida's girl, right? Like, they're dating, and, like, so her approaching you is basically supposed to be presented as, like, her protecting Kamoshida, mm-hmm. right? And that's so, like, it becomes very clear very quickly, like, how kind of, like, wrong, again, that kind of gut perception assumption based on rumors is. I just thought it was a really interesting moment, kind of in that context.
No, yeah, it's a totally like fascinating thing that I think the game does, and this is, I think, like something we touched on a little bit last week, but that we'll probably get into obviously throughout like the whole course of this, is like that back and forth of, I think, like portraying some of this stuff and subverting your expectations in how you perceive people and society. It does it in really great and really awful ways, and it's a strange balance because there is so much good, and then when the bad or the I don't know how to properly phrase it, but the moments that are inconsiderate to people or things of that nature come up, it's such a bummer because you do get moments like that where it's subverting your expectations so that you get a full understanding of it. But then even something like with Mishima, basically saying, we all know this, like, they're pretty immediately, again, we're 4 or 5 days into the game, we're in the first couple hours, it's just like, oh yeah, we're going to be dealing with systemic abuse and how men in society that usually lets them dominate allows them to hold power over people in abusive ways. And it's just like, it's immediately getting to that, and I think it paints a very good picture in this specific setting of how awful that is, but how you can understand how that stuff is allowed to proliferate based on how our society is. Like, this could very well be happening at any high school, and I wouldn't be surprised.
Right.
Like, I think the way it balances that while also simultaneously subverting expectations of people's roles and all this, I think it does both of those really well, which is why when it does some stuff not well, it's frustrating. But yeah, totally. I agree with you. This moment definitely hit me in a surprising way, and especially taking this so much more slowly, like day by day here. We were talking a little bit before the show and at the beginning, but like, it gets heavy so quick.
Yeah, it does. For
a game that is all about the, like, presenting to you with all this style and flair and the crazy awesome music and the amazing animation, it immediately is like, actually, we're going to also be telling a very serious story about abuse and systemic issues in society.
Yeah, it gets very grim and heavy very fast. And I don't think that that's unintentional, but it is like this game can hit you in the teeth kind of quicker than you're expecting, I think, with some of this stuff. And we'll see that kind of coming up in the following days as well.
Yeah.
So the next day, April 14th, is like kind of a quicker one in the context of this week, which is packed with story, obviously.
Yeah.
Like, this week is all about... This week is very interesting to me because it's all about setting you up, and it has to set up the story, but it also weaves together these palace kind of little quick bite infiltrations to teach you kind of mechanics as you go. And I think, again, like we were talking about last week, this does a very, very, very good job of setting up that blend. But this day, specifically, April 14th, is kind of just a little bit of a story day. It's a much quicker one. So it opens with On actually talking to Shiho, who is her best friend, Shiho Suzui, who is sort of beat up and bruised and on the volleyball team. She's on the starting line now for the volleyball team, and she's very sort of out of it and seems very kind of like tense and like restrained in herself. And On is trying to just be a good friend to her and like ask her if she's okay, and she's just sort of like, I'm fine, not really responding very well. And it's very sad. She's clearly, something's wrong, but On doesn't know what to do about it. And then almost immediately after, Shiho's like blocking a doorway, and your character has to go through, and she like doesn't realize, and it's like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm in your way, and then realizes who you are, which you're the transfer student that everyone is gossiping about, and is like, even in her super out of it, stressed out, anxiety-ridden state, is like, has the presence of mind and the kindness to be like, hey, don't let those rumors get to you. People just talk. People gossip about my friend, who she doesn't name On, but she's like, people gossip about my friend all the time, and it's not true. And I thought that was so sweet that, like, Shiho, like, is painted as this, like, very kind, understanding person. And again, like, this idea of, like, the people who are murmured about and the people who are, like, rumored about are, like, all sticking together, knowing that, like, those rumors are not true, right? And like knowing that people just talk, and like in that high school setting, and that's like really, really sweet to me.
Yeah. All of this that happens, especially on this day, as you were saying, it's a bit of a shorter day, but I think like that conversation between Shiho and An is really well done, and that moment when you run into Shiho as well totally, like, really, really hit me as I was watching it unfold. And it was one of those things of, like, oh yeah, this totally is reflective of, like, the idea of how society kind of still expects the victims of abuse to be, like, emotionally resilient and in the face of everything still have to put on a good face. And it's like it is building into all of that stuff so well and so quickly. And it's sort of weirdly juxtaposed. I think for me, there was, like, this one moment when after the Shiho and An discussion, two other students come over and they're, like, gossiping about them. And one of the dudes, I wrote it down just because it was like, it just feels like out of place in that moment where the guy's like, come on, dude, you can't go after Kamoshida's bitch.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, yeah, I could definitely see a high school student saying that because I went to an all-guys high school, and let me tell you, a lot of those dudes did not talk kindly. But it's just one of those moments where it was like, I don't know if it was needed right there with that harshness to get the point across.
Yeah, This game does that all the time, right? Like, it has these really genuine moments next to these really kind of gross moments. And there's an argument to be made that something like that it intentionally is supposed to kind of punctuate that, but I agree that I think at certain times it doesn't really punctuate as much as it's just sort of like, oh, that felt really incongruent with, like, the deep moment that just happened.
Yeah, like I think there's a way to convey that, like, the rumors and the assumptions about people at that school is pervasive enough that excuse me, just these two random students are going to think this way about them. But excuse me, sorry, I got something caught in my throat. It's something along those lines of, like, I get that, and I think that is, like, a good point to be made of just how pervasive this rumor mongering is and how awfully it can cause people's lives to be. But it, like, the way it's presented in that moment, you're right. It just feels like such a bit of whiplash, and I don't think does that. But as you were saying, like, that moment with Shiho when you see her in the hall was really powerful and really impactful in just, like, such a small, quick way. The
other major thing that happens on this day, April 14th, is that we finally, Morgana and Ryuji, Morgana shows up to talk to Ryuji and Joker as a real cat in the real world. And it turns out that when Morgana A, doesn't need an app to transfer between that world and this one, and B, when Morgana comes to the real world, is just a cat, an adorable cat that they can hear talk, but nobody else can. Everyone else just hears meows. And then continues one of my favorite running jokes throughout the whole game is, like, people in the school searching for a cat somewhere in the school that's, like, they can't find.
What's that meowing over there that I hear? Huh? Yeah. Is that a rogue cat somewhere in the school? It's just always like they're just so obvious about, like, where could this cat be?
Yeah, but and my favorite part is Morgana hearing them look for him and then being like, meow, and just, like, saying meow is gonna help at all.
Well, and then
so weird.
You can also respond to Ryuji when he's freaking out about it by saying meow, which I've picked every time I think I've played that scene because it pisses him off in just such a fun way.
Oh yeah. But Morgana, you guys all meet on the roof, and Morgana explains actually what castles are and actually what you could do about Kamoshida and the way. And basically the explanation, and some of this, excuse me, if it might come out a little more over the next few days, but basically the palace and the castle is Kamoshida's palace, which is this cognitive world built around how he sees the school and all of that. And at the center of it is his kind of distorted desires, right? And the way that what you could do is if you steal that desire, their treasure, as they call it, if you steal that desire, the palace will collapse. They'll lose their desire for that distorted thing or whatever, and they will essentially have a change of heart and become not want that thing anymore. And so they'll completely change what they want in their priorities, which sounds like this great, absolute, cure-all solution to the Kamoshida problem. But Morgana explains that without desires, you don't have the desire to eat, to fall in love, to sleep, right? And you could become, if they're not careful, this person could become just, like, basically vegetative and need care, or else they might die. And something that I think is really important in this moment is that Joker and Ryuji are handed basically a get-out-of-jail-free card of, here's how we can deal with this guy. But because they're explicitly told, hey, this could kill him potentially, maybe if we do it wrong, they don't do it, right?
Yeah.
They're like, we don't, like, they're like, no, like, that's not, like, we want this guy to pay, but we don't want to kill him, right? And I think that's such a formative, important moment in this whole story of them being like, they're not just vigilantes. Like, they have really strong morals of, like, we want him to atone for his crimes. We don't want him to just, like, we don't want to just kill the guy.
Look,
and so they...
Sorry,
go ahead.
I was going to say
yeah.
God damn it. Yeah, fine. I was going to make a joke, so you go on and say the real thing, because you were going on a good path. Sorry.
I don't even remember what I was going to say.
I was just going to say, no, I agree that they have all these morals. I do think it's funny that they have these morals. Ryuji is still going to bring a fake gun around to freak people out and try.
Oh, yeah.
But no, I totally agree that, like, it does... I think it does a really great job, and again, I think it is a benefit of this game being so long that it has this room to breathe and to have these beats that they can be like, well, no, we don't just want to kill this guy. We are kids in school who are just trying to get rid of a bad man from this position of power. We are not trying to get rid of him permanently in a life. Like, we are not the ones who decide this. And yeah, I do agree. I think it sets up their moral standing pretty well from the jump.
Yeah. Because a large part of this, even the way that it was presented at the very beginning, right, with the flash forward scene of you getting captured by the police, is like the way that everyone has presented you as a criminal. The police read off this list of stuff like manslaughter and all these charges against you, and you're like, oh, I don't know what to believe. And this is one of those moments early on where you're like, oh no, they're not those people, right? Like, they're not just rushing out to kill somebody. And so they go looking for a different solution. But this day has one last more kind of important thing too, which is on the way home in Shibuya, you come across who's on the phone with somebody in a very loud argument, who you end up finding out is Kamoshida, and he threatens with something, and she breaks down crying, and Joker kind of is like, hey, I couldn't help it over here. Are you okay? And she runs away from you at first, but then you, like, have to pursue her to try to comfort her, which is very weird, but that's okay, because it's well-meaning, and you end up going to a cafe and basically just, like, being a shoulder for An to cry toward, and, like, letting stuff out even though she doesn't know you, and just listening to her and being there for her when she doesn't really have anyone who just understands. And it's this very kind of touching moment where An opens up to you and you guys get a little closer, and she explains that basically everyone thinks that she's dating Kamoshida, but he's actually just a total creep who is, like, basically trying to manipulate her into sexual favors with a student, which is horrible. And when she shot him down, she's lied to him multiple times. You see it on an earlier day as well, lying to him multiple times to get him to back off. He basically says, fine, well, if you won't come over to my house tonight, which is creepy as all hell, then, like, I guess Shiho's gonna lose her starting spot on the volleyball team. And that's kind of what breaks On down. And it's, like, really, really horrible. And you kind of get, this is, like, one of another moment where you really understand the full kind of depravity of Kamoshida, right? Like, he is, without remorse, a terrible human being.
Yeah, it's one of those things where we were saying earlier of, like, the morals that they have, which I think are very sound, of, like, we don't want to just do this thing that will inadvertently kill these people, but this is a terrible man, and this is just further solidifying just how like, at the root of who he is awful. And as you were saying earlier too, it subverts the expectation of that scene from earlier where An tells you to back off, right? And again, it's playing into, like, the rumors at school. Like, there are probably students who are rumor mongering who think she wants to be involved with Kamoshida, and this is something that she is willfully being part of. And of course that plays into the whole ideas of just like a male dominated society where horrible men just get to kind of rule without remorse. And it's very clear of the emotional toll that it's taking on her. I do not blame her for running away from you in that one, especially after your first introduction is staring at her. for 5 minutes on the street a couple days
Yeah.
earlier. But that part of it aside, I do think the scene between them, it lets you have a bit more of an understanding of Ann, especially because, like, I do think from the beginning of the game, she is perceived as the pretty blonde, sports girl or whatever. Like, not even necessarily sports, but like she is the, the seemingly this girl that everyone's talking about in pretty sexually explicit like terms, and it's very, very gross because we're in this high school setting and everything. But it lets you see that there is a lot more to her situation that's going on that I really appreciate.
Yeah. So, moving on to the next day. Well, I guess the last thing that happened I should mention is you get a shot of a scene in the school still of Mishima, a very beat up Mishima, asking Shiho that Kamoshida wants her in his office, and it's very clearly like awful. Like, it is just an awful, tense situation.
Yeah.
And then it cuts away. And the next day, April 15th, starts out with a goof and then just goes very dark very quickly, where Morgana is just like in your desk. This is the first time of many that you'll have a cat in your desk meowing and the teacher being like, where is it meowing? And it's like treated very lighthearted, but then it gets very, very grim very quickly, where all of the students rush to the windows and Shiho herself is on the roof of the school and jumps, which is obviously awful and kind of what's the word? Traumatizing for everyone around, especially Ann and obviously her.
Yeah, it's it immediately it's so unfortunate, but it immediately gets you into that point of like the consequences of what Kamoshida is doing so fully, and it ties into that scene, with Mishima, which clearly was indicating things that were already bad were about to just get worse.
Right.
And it's so unfortunate, and I think a crystallization moment of just like they also like, could they have acted earlier and done what they needed to for the palace? We know by like the gameplay mechanics, technically not.
Right.
But it is one of those things that immediately it's like, maybe if they had rushed into the palace and tried to do something, maybe they could have stopped it. Like it brings up all these conflicting feelings of wanting to make right by what this terrible, terrible man is doing as the king of this castle. It's such a surprisingly dark, but I think well done moment to portray sort of the gravity of how awful he is and what he's doing to these students.
Yeah. Also, we did want to call out at this moment just, obviously we're talking about this in sort of the context of the game and what it means to the story, but suicide is not a joke, and if you are having thoughts or considering self-harm in any way, we encourage you to reach out and it's worth sticking around. And I believe, Jonathan, you have a couple things to call out real quick.
Yeah. If you're having any suicidal thoughts or need to talk to someone, we want to make sure to point you to the two. These are the U.S. specific hotlines and text lines. The text line that you can reach out to, the crisis text line that has qualified crisis counselors standing by and willing to talk by text, is you can just text 741-741, or you can call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-8255 in the U.S. If you go to suicide.org/international-suicide-hotlines, and I'll put this link in the text. There are also numbers for international territories as well that you can reach out to and call if you want to. And as Tom had said, if you are feeling these thoughts or feelings, definitely encourage you to reach out.
So moving right along, obviously this is a very intense moment in the school. Everyone is gathered. You see Mishima run off in fear, and Ryuji, being the hothead he is, gets super mad, runs after Mishima with you. You confront him, and Mishima basically spills the beans about what Kamoshida did to Shiho, and all three of them run into Kamoshida's office, who's just like working on paperwork at this point, like really messed up. If it wasn't already clear.
how little feeling he has for his actions.
Yeah. So Ryuji threatens him. You all threaten him, basically saying you know what you did. He's like, you don't have any proof. And then finally he's just like, okay, all 3 of you are expelled. And it's like, oh, again, he's in a position of power and we have no evidence, so therefore he just wins and it's really messed up. So he says at the next board meeting, I'm going to recommend all 3 of you are expelled. Enjoy your time till then. Bye. And like, that's that. And so you decide at this moment, you know what? The only way to get him to stop is to change his heart. So we're going to do that. And you just are discussing this in the school, and then On comes over to you and is like, hey, I want in because I hate this dude too. And Ryuji, in this moment, I always thought Ryuji was just being a jerk, but it's really clear, actually. He basically tells her to, like, leave because he wants to protect her, which is, like, very kind of, like, it's, like, a little bit saviory, but it's, like, noble. It's noble intentions.
Yes, yeah, it's definitely the chivalrous man acting. It's the, like, go on, get, because I'm trying to save you, but you don't know it. It's, like...
Right.
And granted, like, On obviously has gone through this just emotionally... awful experience with her best friend, earlier that day. And so I very much agree with you. I think the scene is meant to be read as Ryuji wanting to protect her.
Yeah.
Whether he goes about it in the best ways, I don't think he does, but I also think you can read that that's kind of the point. Like,
yeah,
he is kind of new to this, both, putting himself out there to help others and all these things. I think it doesn't feel out of line with the character so far for him to act that way.
Right. So you guys go out to the front of the school. You use the app, and because On, and this is one of my favorite little things about this, because On is nearby when you use the app, she also gets sucked in to the metaverse at the palace, which is just like the most dangerous thing because they use this thing in public all the time, and the fact that like random bystanders don't just also get pulled in is amazing to me.
It is amazing, a little convenient, but yeah, I had that thought too, where it happened, and On, just because of her nature of being close, and granted, like, she's close, but she's far enough away, like physically, that there have definitely been other times where other people should have ended up in the metaverse, and I kind of wanted just a cutaway now somewhere in the future of just like them going into the metaverse and then jumping over to just a random bypasser who's like, why is there a giant castle here? Like, what is happening? And they freak out. But it definitely is a little bit of a convenient thing, but it helps get us into some really great stuff with the group.
And the best part, or the funniest part, the weirdest part, is that they're immediately like, oh no, you can't be here, and just like push her out of the metaverse and then keep going. Like, there's like, okay, cool. At this point, they also come up with code names. So Joker actually becomes Joker, Morgana becomes Mona, and Ryuji becomes Skull. They're basically saying, we don't want to use our real names at the palace because who knows what'll happen if the ruler hears our real names. It's kind of a weird, they just have code names, go with it.
Morgana might as well have been like, why don't we call this one Idiot?
Yeah,
no, it's definitely like the cadence of that conversation. Like, yeah, I love Joker. It sounds cool. And then we got dumbass over here. Oh no, I guess that won't work. Whatever.
Weird. Yeah. So you go into your third palace infiltration, and you get kind of one of the core mechanics of the game at this point, which is you discover Joker can take multiple personas, and any enemy can be a little bargaining mini game where you like talk to them and like realize you have something in common, and then they join you as a new mask you can switch to as Joker, which means Persona suddenly has become Pokemon. Like, you can just, and this is not a new mechanic for Persona, but you can collect all these personas for Joker and swap to them with different abilities. And I think that's really, at this point, the combat is sort of like, obviously there's more mechanics to come, but like fully fleshed out, and like you have your gun mechanic, you have your weaknesses, you've got an assortment of abilities you can use to trigger different weaknesses, you can get personas, multiple personas, and suddenly this is what the combat is, and like now you get to spend some time with it in the palace. But before you really do, you find out that On, because she was in the palace already, has it on the phone, the app on her phone, comes back in and gets caught because Kamoshida's guards think that she's the cognitive version of On, who is always in a creepy bikini and cat ears, and they take her prisoner. So you have to rush in before they kill her to save her. But instead of saving her, she decides to stick up for herself and awakens her own persona, which is Carmen, which is this flamenco dancer, and she gets into her questionable zipper leather-clad outfit, but that's okay. No, it's not. It's very weird.
Yeah. Well,
but it's very odd that like the personas are supposed to be like the like it's supposed to be your inner rebel, and like then she's just like immediately uncomfortable in those clothes.
Yep.
Is like, okay,
yeah,
sure,
like
game.
she should probably be comfortable in her inner self, if that's what's it's again, it's that balance of like the like, especially in a scene where she is fighting against the notion of Kamoshida having this cognitive version of her who is obviously just a sexual object to him, which is just so wrong on so many levels. And then she's like, I'm going to become my full self. And like, there is, I think, something to be said about the game wanting to say like a woman can own her sexuality and also be badass. Like they don't have to be mutually exclusive, but it is in that weird position of, one, we're talking about high schoolers. And two, then she immediately expresses discomfort in being in the costume.
Yeah. That's the part that gets to me. Like, the outfit itself is, like, even in the context of anime outfits, not even as terrible, like, risque as it could have been. Yeah. But, like, the fact that she's then, like, I don't want to be dressed like this is like, oh, that's weird, game. Okay.
Yeah.
Like, why'd you have to say that? Why couldn't she just be, like, cool with it?
Yep.
Anyway. Yeah. Moving on. You then fight a monster who's also really gross, which is just a demon who's on the toilet pooping.
Yep. Yeah.
Just like, okay, sure.
There are some wild persona designs in this, and granted, I don't have a history or knowledge of what creatures have been before, but it's really fun and bizarre to have this balance of like, oh, there's a pixie girl, and there's Jack Frost from another Atlas game, and then there's a man pooping. A demon man taking a crap.
I feel like this is the point where the game really just stops, like, caring.
Yeah.
And now it's just like, we're just going full bore. Just roll with it. Keep rolling with it. And you're like, okay.
Yep,
like,
we're going.
All right. So you manage to get on out. The infiltration is stopped. Instead of getting to the treasure, you just get on out and you all escape. And you explain the situation on, and she's like, hey, I can fight too. Let me join. And you're like, yeah, that's true. Hell yeah. And so she's on your team now, and you have your full party of 4, which is exciting. But Morgana is still a cat living in the real world, and so Morgana comes to live with Joker at Le Blonde, which results in one of my favorite moments of the entire week, probably, because you bring Morgana back in your bag, and you put Morgana down on the bed, and Sojiro comes up and is like, I thought I heard meowing in here. What are you doing? You can't have cats in this restaurant. Like, maybe if he stays upstairs. And then he leaves. And then he comes back and he's like, got a bowl of milk. And he's like, well, it's just so cute with this meowing. And like gives her the bowl of milk. And then he's like, so did you name it yet? And you say it's Morgana. And he's like, aw, I thought I was going to name it.
Yeah.
And then he leaves. And it's like, Sojiro, you're so cute.
It's so great. It was one of those, I'm so glad you wrote that moment down too. Because I did also. Because it's so funny to just get this moment because of how gruff he's been to you.
Right.
And just in general so far. And like, I forget if it's this day or a little bit later in the week where he has like basically a confrontation with a customer who's like telling him how to do his job, and he's like, I don't care about this. I'm just gonna run this shop like I want to. Like, don't tell me how to make my coffee and talk to you. But yeah, when he comes up and is just this sweet to Morgana, it's like, oh, there is more to this guy than a man who is begrudgingly taking you in. Like, there's a reason he took you in. Like, there is a goodness there that you're going to slowly find. And I completely forgot about this moment from my first playthrough. And so I really love that you called it out too, because I just adored it.
It's just so sweet. It's very much the first of many moments of Sojiro's sort of like tough exterior coming down a little bit. Yeah. And I love it. I love it for that. The next 2 days are a little bit different because they're mostly just like getting you ready for like the mechanical side of things that you need to start exploring a palace. So on April 16th, besides getting beamed in the head with chalk by a teacher for the first time of many probably, Morgana basically explains on the roof, which is now your hideout, that you're going to need to get prepped. You're going to need weapons and medicine and that sort of thing. So after that day, after the school day, you go to Takemi's medical clinic, which is in Yongenjaya, right near Cafe Le Blonde. and you meet Takemi, who is just this punk rock doctor who is super sketchy and apparently makes her own there's again rumors about her, right, that she makes sketchy medicine and that she'll sell it to anybody. So you go in asking for sketchy medicine, and she kind of like susses you out as like lying to her for drugs, and her response to this is, okay, and she gives you drugs.
Yep. I do like that the dialogue options here at least are very reflective of, I think, a teenager attempting this, where he's like,
it's so clumsy.
Yeah, I have a headache from studying, and she's like, have you heard the rumors and about me making drugs? And he's like, yeah, but can I have some? I know this is not how Joker talks exactly, but it's this very like, yeah, I guess if you want to give me the drugs, whatever, it's cool.
Yeah, it's exactly that. Yeah, you're dead on. Takemi is a character you'll see a lot more of too.
But so, yeah, it's definitely a strange situation. I did forget to shout this out last week, but basically when you first enter Yongenjaya, you do see her in the background. Walking behind you, which is one of those, I think, that like as people who know the game will notice these moments. But I do like that they do see characters like Haru, like Takemi, that you'll meet possibly much later down the line. But
yeah, they added a lot more of those in 4 Royal too,
okay.
Which I think is a little bit meant for people who've played it already, kind of getting a little bit of that throughout the game.
But yeah, it is a strange relationship, and I do not know
Incredibly
the healthcare
strange.
scene in Japan, so if we have any Japanese listeners who want to let me know if there are just doctors who run medicinal figure it out on their own sort of situations, please let me know.
She has a license.
She does.
Has a license.
But she still is making her own stuff. But yeah, it's this weird combination of like, I've never lived in a town where there was a town doctor who everyone knew, but also was concerned about at the same. It's just it's a strange relationship. I do think there are interesting facets of the character, but yeah, it's a strange introduction for sure.
Yeah. And then the next day, not much else happens that day. The next day, April 17th, you go meet another strange interaction with an adult that feels weird, where you meet with Ryuji at a sketchy model gun store in the back alley of Central Street, Shibuya, and meet the proprietor of it, who is basically like, yeah, I'll sell you model guns that look incredibly realistic high schoolers, just like don't get caught with it and don't do anything dumb with it, because then it'll come back on me. And this is where you get the shop. So Takemi's medical clinic is basically where you buy the best medical healing items, right? And like recovery items. And then this is where you buy everything else. This is where you buy accessories, buy armor, buy guns, and buy weapons, and then can also sell some of those things back to them. And right off the bat, you're given a decent amount of choice.
Yeah.
I was going to bring this up, but, like, you don't have much money at this point in the game.
No.
Unless you did what I did and have both the deluxe edition of the game and save data from Persona 5 already on your PS5 or PS4, because then what happens is they give you 50,000 yen right away, and you buy everything you could ever want, and it feels like cheating.
I forgot to download my save, so I didn't get to do that.
Yeah, you get a lot of money really quick.
I had no idea that actually happened, and man, yeah, I spent all my money, and so we'll get to the next day in the beginning in a minute, but I made a specific choice because of how little money I had. But yeah, I bought like 1 or 2 things, and I was like, I guess this will be good enough. Also, question, so he's selling you model guns. Are the physical weapons he's selling you real or also models?
We don't ask questions like that.
Okay, because it's very much implied that he's like, yeah, I'll sell you model guns. Oh, but you want these daggers and katanas? All right.
Yeah, we don't bring that up.
Fair enough.
Don't talk about that.
Fair enough.
Because that's one of those places where I think mechanics just like flavor and mechanics just like don't mesh quite well, and that's fine. Like, very intentionally.
This is me nitpicking because we're doing this show, not. But like if I was playing along, I would not.
Yeah, because it's a model gun store, right? And like the alternative would be to like also have a different weapon store, and that'd just be annoying. So you just have like one weapon shop, and it's like fine. Yeah, definitely the like 50,000 from the save data feels like cheating, because I just have You have enough money to buy a ton of medical items. Basically, everybody got better armor. Basically, everybody got weapons. And what it does is, like, that money isn't going to matter long term, but, like, for the first palace, it just sort of jumpstarts you, which is okay because I am playing on hard this time, which I didn't play because when I played Persona 1, I played on easy, and then when I did Royal, I did normal and thought it was too easy, and then now I'm on hard, and I'm enjoying the difficulty, but I also appreciate that money, if that makes sense.
Totally. I'm on normal, I think. So
yeah.
Yeah.
And you can, you know, it's you play whatever difficulty you want. I'm not a stickler for difficulty at all. Anyway, you get back to your house, and Morgana has you clear off a table to introduce one more mechanic, which is crafting. You can spend time in the evening to craft infiltration tools, which, in my experience, is lockpicks, only lockpicks, and nothing else ever but lockpicks.
The only time I've ever crafted anything else there is when I've started crafting, realized I didn't have enough to do all lockpicks, and was like, I guess I'll make another item. But yeah, it's lockpicks is the way to go. There's nothing else that's worth it there.
Yeah, because it takes time, or it will later. But anyway. And finally, April 18th hits. We get a short scene that's also a Royal exclusive scene where you cross paths. Kawakami calls you into a meeting to basically ask what you're doing and why Kamoshida is mad at you. But really what it is an excuse to cross paths with Yoshizawa again, who is that new character, new honor student, who you find out is also an athlete. And a very well, you know, like a potentially like a medalist of some kind, or
perfect
like a
people.
Yeah, basically. So you meet Yoshizawa, and she's very polite and appreciative again. And then you get that beautiful mission start thing on the chalkboard, and we enter our first deadline free time period, which means that we have 14 days until expulsion. At which point, if you haven't changed Kamoshida's heart by then, you're expelled. And so, you have 14 days to do whatever you want. The funny thing is, Persona gives you statistics on what other people have done during any given day. You can press the touchpad and then press the D-pad, and you can see what's up and what other people have done. 60% of people have just go to the palace the very first day. Which is not what I did.
I mean, I thought I looked that up too, and I meant to write it down, so thank you for remembering. I thought that was wild. I was like, I get the impetus of like, oh, well, the game is telling me to start doing this thing, so I'm just going to start doing it. But I also was like, oh, I have 14 days. I'll take my time.
Yeah. It's the great debate, I think, of do you go early because you just want to get it out of the way, or do you go late because then you can like do other things beforehand? But then if you don't have money, going to the palace is the best way to get money generally before another thing unlocks that we won't talk about right now. And like, so yeah,
the
it's this,
microtransactions, of course.
Yeah, the microtransactions. No. So yeah, there's this push and pull, and I think there's no wrong answers, but as you check those statistics, like you'll see that people like overwhelmingly just go to the palace right away, and I think that's generally not what I do. And I think generally on this show we'll probably be talking about palaces closer to the end of free time than we would at the beginning.
Yeah. Well, I did want to ask you about our approach, and I figured what better way to do it than on the show itself. But we should definitely talk about what we did this day, but then I think, do you want to do that first or talk about our philosophies on palace stuff?
Go ahead. We can do philosophy, sure. Or actually, let's talk about what we did first. Let's talk about what we did first. You're hearing the brainstorming process live, people. Don't worry about it. Go ahead. What'd you do today?
No. So what did I do? Because I didn't have 50,000 yen to work with, I went to go get my first job, and I guess this is a little bit of a cheat because I knew of the jobs previously.
Right.
Like the game
part-time work.
The game doesn't tell you this right here, but you will get the option pretty soon, so I don't really feel like this is a spoiler. But essentially you can go pick up some part-time work. And a couple of them are gated behind having certain parameters, so like you need your guts or your charm or whatnot up to a certain level. But so the basic one you can do is work at the 777 convenience store mart. And so I did that because that was the easiest one to work on, even though it's not a day that ends in 7, which gets you more money. I was like, let me get this initial one out of the way. Let me just start the job. I'll get a little bit of money because I spent a little bit to get a weapon or two and was down to like 500. So I needed something. I went to go immediately get some money. I don't think it's the best use of time, but the reason I didn't go... No, I'll let you go first.
So, yeah, I guess one thing we should quickly explain for people not playing, you have an afternoon right after school section of time, and then you have an evening section of time. And at this point in the game, the evening section of time has to be spent in LeBlanc. You can't go out at night. Yeah. This is also the point where the first thing I did was just run to every corner of the map to unlock all of the fast travel things. I went to the library and took out a book. You should always have a book from the library, because if you have a chance to read, you'll have something from there.
I have a confession.
What?
I've never been to the library.
What?
Ever.
They have so many books!
I just buy them from the shops.
But there's unique ones. You can always take one out and it's free, and then you just return it when it's done.
I had no idea. I should probably go do that then.
Yeah, it's great. The library is very useful. It doesn't take any time to rent a book out.
Oh, okay.
But the one thing I did was I actually hung out with Takemi during the afternoon, which is how you unlock her as a actual confidant, is you participate in her clinical trials, basically, and you agree to be her guinea pig, and she agrees to give you better medicine, basically. Which, again, incredibly problematic and concerning that this, like, adult medical professional is using an unlicensed, like, off-the-books teenager to, like, test medicine is, like, really messed up. Yeah. But also, she gives you the good drugs now.
It's very much like I met you once and you asked me about drugs. Do you want more? Because we can make this happen. But yeah, it's a lot, that side quest.
It's really weird. It's a really weird one.
I think it's one I didn't engage with super much my first time around, but I probably should. It's one of those weird things where like I am engaging in things, and we'll talk about more of these later on, that I don't necessarily love watching, but have to because they give you some of the best options in the game.
Yeah. Oh, I go all heartless for the mechanics.
Yeah.
So what about the evening?
Just clean the room.
So this is the kind of de facto. You can do a lot of things in LeBlanc, right? When you're trapped in there, you can study, which gets up your knowledge. You can read a book at the counter. You can clean the cafe, which will get you kindness. Again,
a thing I didn't know you could do until I opened up the trophy list for P5R, and it was like, clean LeBlanc. And I was like, you can do that? Okay.
And if you go into bathrooms, even the bathrooms at Shujin, it'll tell you how close you are to leveling up your social skills.
Oh.
So it'll be like, I think I'm pretty close to getting more knowledge up and stuff. Yeah.
Why do I know so little about this game I love? This is going to be a recurring theme because, we won't spoil it, but there was a thing you told me about, or someone else told me about, like a distant conversation. Alex O'Neill and Barrett Courtney and I were talking, and they were telling me about a mechanic, and I was just like, that's a thing in the game? Oh my god. Like, I love this game. I played 120 hours of the base game. I missed so much.
It's dense. There's a lot to find and a lot just sort of hidden around that it doesn't always make abundantly clear. And I think that the checking your social skills might be a royal thing. Okay. I might be mistaken about that. But regardless, the other thing that we both did is you just clean up your room because it's still a disaster and full of stuff, and that gets you a couple books. It unlocks the house plant, which will be a thing that you can feed to get kindness, and it gives you the TV, although the TV is not functional quite yet. And that was our week.
Yeah.
It was a big one. It was a long. Yeah, there's a long thing. I think next week though is our first week. We now have 13 more days until the deadline, which means that we have a lot of time to see how Jonathan and I are going to differ.
Yeah.
We have a lot of time to discuss, the strategy of that stuff. We also have a lot of time that we're going to be digging into some of the topics beyond just like recapping what we did each day, right? We're going to actually talk about some of that stuff, like, maybe some early tips like getting a book from the library, or like how we feel about the deadline structure. There's a lot we can dig into in this next week that is just going to be literally 7 days of us picking what we want to do each time.
And on that,
Yes.
we have the option of when we want to go to the palace.
Yeah. I'm of the try-hard mindset that I always try to knock out a palace in a day, which is, like, maybe less feasible if we're playing in real time, I was thinking, because, like, even if I can do it in-game, like, I might not have the real-world hours in a week to do that, so that might be interesting. But I think probably, I usually generally just wait till I have, like, a day that seems a little slower, and then I'll go then, and usually that comes a little later, but I don't know.
Yeah, no, I'm very much of the mind, like, well, my cadence that I got into when I played Persona 5 was that I enjoyed having a few days, at least, then going to the palace, and then having a few days. Like, essentially to give it this wave so that you're not just doing everyday stuff for 14 days and then a palace, or doing a palace and then having 14 days. Like, it broke it up for me. But I feel like it will benefit us if we are roughly playing the palace at the same time.
Yeah, that's fair.
I do think all our other choices, as we said, like, at the beginning, we're not going to, like, tell each other or, like, coordinate. But I do think it will probably be better to have, like, some expectation for us to be able to talk about the palace at the same time.
Yeah. And let us know, too, if you listeners, dear friends, have any thoughts about, you know, because obviously people are going to be playing it at different times as well. So we don't want to talk about it too early because there might be spoilers, but we don't want to talk about it too late because then it butts into, like, the boss fight stuff and the final areas and that sort of thing. So, like, there's a balance that we're gonna have to find, and I think we can probably find it in the next couple weeks. But I'm excited. We can obviously discuss and not, you know, come up with plans on camera as we are known to do. Yeah. But
let's take another, like, 30 minutes just to talk about the schedule.
It's gonna be interesting to see how we kind of find our footing on that in that regard, and how we differ too, because we might just be playing very differently.
Yeah, I'm very excited to find out what those differences are, because I apparently can miss a lot of things in this game. So am I playing for any? I don't know. We'll see. I'm excited for it.
Let's close things off with the way we closed off last week. I really enjoyed doing some quizzy stuff. I had some people sending me answers as well online. So Jonathan, do you have something prepared?
I do. Yeah. Sorry, I forgot to put it on the show, but I do have another Persona pseudonym to give you.
So this is the me quiz, and then we'll have a pop quiz for you, the listeners, as well.
This is again. So I guess to clarify, I will be going for the entire Persona 5 lineup of personas, but given how I didn't establish that last week,
no, it's fair.
I'm gonna go with what I think is a relatively easy one, and I'm working by the rule of pretty much if it's not something we could have seen within this window, I'm probably not going to name it.
Okay.
So this one I am 99% sure we have seen, so it's an early on one. They are known as the Crypt-Dwelling Pyromaniac.
Oh, its name is just Jack-o'-lantern, right?
Yes, yeah. Also known, I think, in other SMT lore as Pyro Jack. But yes, Jack-o'-lantern is correct.
Awesome. I'm glad that was a softball one, especially after I screwed up last week. So I appreciate that.
Screwed up.
No. No, you first. No, you first. Anyway, our pop quiz, which I'll answer on next week's show, and you can feel free to send us answers at dornology@gmail.com or on our Twitters, wherever it may be, is this. Here's a question of events that happened during this last week that you can figure out and send us an answer as well. At one point in the halls of Shujin Academy, blows off Kamoshida, basically lying to him to get out of hanging out with him because he's a total creepy, awful human being, and says that she has a photo shoot for a very special summer shoot thing, and that she's also not feeling well. And Kamoshida mentions that she told him she has some sort of disease that she says, yeah, I've been meaning to go to the hospital for that, but I just haven't had the time. What time-sensitive and very life-threatening disease did An tell Kamoshida she just hasn't had the time to get checked out?
I truly don't
That's the question.
I'm excited for that. I'm totally blanking. So that is going to be a very interesting. Yeah, sometimes it really comes through that they're teenagers and not the best at lying.
Yeah, they're not very good at lying at all. But I think we are going to be very good at lying down, because this was the first week where we actually had Morgana tell us that we should probably just get some sleep and go to bed, which sounds like a great idea to me. I've been Tom Marks, joined as always by Jonathan Dornbush.
I've been Jonathan.
Yeah, and you can find us, again, I'm at Tom R. Marks on Twitter. Jonathan is at JM Dornbush.
Yes, correct.
At Twitter. And then we have the Dornology at gmail.com. You can obviously subscribe. We are ramping up podcasting platforms, but iTunes, Google Play,
Spotify,
obviously Spotify,
Pocket
the YouTube,
Casts.
Dornology YouTube, and more platforms going to be coming as we kind of roll out and finish up. But thank you so much for joining us on episode 2. That was April 12th to April 18th. Next week we are doing April 19th plus 7 days, because I'm bad at math and I don't know calendars very well. But it'll be a great free week, and we'll see you then.